You may be wondering, what in the world is this blasphemous sounding title about when God lets you rot? What in the world? Well, has the Lord ever called you to do something and maybe you thought you were supposed to do it immediately, but then the Lord had you wait and wait and wait? It's like you're dying a slow death. It's kind of like Abraham. The Lord told Abraham he was going to bless him with a child, and he had him wait for 24 years before you finally said, by this time next year, you will have this son. It was like Abraham was just rotting. Abraham was getting old. His wife was getting old. Maybe you know the feeling, maybe you don't. But yes, this message is literally about when God lets you rot. Sometimes it may be a natural death. Other times it's spiritual, because whatsoever it is the Lord wants you to do, He's going to have you die to yourself first. He's going to bring you to a point where you know there's no way you could have done this by your own strength. And it's kind of like with what the Lord said in Zechariah 4:6, not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. So yes, this is Social Aloe Ministries, where we glorify God and expose the devil. And this, despite its sound, will glorify the Lord thy God. And the foundation for this actually starts in John 11. And literally, the Lord allowed someone to rot for His glory. Because another thing, not only that the Lord may have made a promise to you, and He has you wait for a very long time, but you may have ran into some trouble, and you've called upon the Lord, and He has not delivered you immediately. And you've been going through things over and over again. Now you know the Lord has not left or forsaken you. It certainly felt like it. And not to elevate yourself to be like Jesus, but you may feel at the point where when Jesus was on the cross and said, my God, why have you forsaken me? You may even feel as if the Lord has forsaken or withdrawn Himself from you. But let us dive in. In John 11, it tells the story of Jesus' beloved friend, Lazarus. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus, of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped His feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore His sisters sent unto Him, Jesus, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. So Jesus loved Lazarus. His sisters knew it. They called for him. And surely, because the Lord loves him, as soon as He heard that something's going on, Jesus is going to just drop everything He's doing and run to Lazarus' house. When Jesus heard that, He said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. So yes, the Lord will allow you to rot for the glory of God. Can you deal with it? Can you handle when the Lord allows you to rot? So again, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. The Bible tells us about us being living epistles. We're living words of God. Like in the Bible, many people live lives like under the what we call Old Testament or Old Covenant. Their lives were reflective of the Lord. Joseph spending time in prison and being elevated to the second highest is like Jesus, how He was here on earth falsely accused, incarcerated, crucified, and now He sits at the right hand of God the Father, just like Joseph did with Pharaoh. Jonah spending 3 days in the belly of the whale. Jonah rotted. Jonah spending 3 days in the belly of the whale. Jesus also spent 3 days but in the grave, and He was risen from the dead. So there are people, another example, Hosea. He married a promiscuous woman. She went astray, and the Lord told him to go redeem her again. It's like how Jesus came the first time. His bride has been promiscuous. She went astray, but the Lord is coming to redeem her again. So everything we're doing is for the glory of God. And according to Romans 8, all things do work together for the good of those who love the Lord and have been called according to his purpose. And continues. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So here's letting us know that yes, the things that are going on is for the glory of God, and it's letting us know that whatever is going on, despite the events, that Jesus undoubtedly loved them. Which is one of the things, when you're dying, when you're rotting, you may start feeling or start wondering if the Lord loves you. And kind of like how after Jesus was baptized and he was in the wilderness and the devil came along and said, if you are the Son of God. But this was after the Father had spoken, as recorded in Matthew 3:16-17, about this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. The Father had already stated that Jesus was his Son. But because Jesus was going through the stuff, having fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, the devil come along saying, if you are the Son of God. And the enemy likes to come along when you're going through things. Oh, where's your God now? Did God really say? Why isn't he showing up for you? Those are the kind of things the enemy will try to speak when you're going through, I would say, the decaying process. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. What was Jesus doing for those 2 days? Why he couldn't go and see Lazarus? Then after that saith he to his disciples, let us go into Judea again. That's not Bethany. So he still hasn't gone. His disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, because he seeth the light of this world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go, that I may awake him out of sleep. So the Lord has said that his sickness would not be unto death, and now he's saying Lazarus is asleep. So Jesus knew what was going on with Lazarus. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit, Jesus spake of his death. Hold up. In verse 4, the Lord said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God. The Lord said it was not unto death, but Lazarus still died. And that's one of the things. Sometimes you wait on the promise from the Lord, and things literally die around you. It's like the promise is dead, but it's all for God's glory. The Lord said it would not be unto death, and Lazarus still died. And it's one of the things, when the Lord has spoken a word to you, stand on the word, because it doesn't matter what comes up. He has to fulfill his word one way or another. When the Lord told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, one of the things Abraham reasoned is that he could kill Isaac and the Lord could raise him from the dead. He had no precedence for that, but he felt like the Lord could raise Isaac from the dead, simply because the Lord had made a promise and the Lord had made a covenant, as we see in Genesis 17, that his covenant would be with Isaac, and that those children, the numerous children, like the stars in the sky or the dust of the earth, those numerous children would come through Isaac. And he was too young to have children. Isaac hadn't had any children yet. So one way or another, Abraham knew he could kill Isaac, and if it meant the Lord raising him from the dead, because he had a promise from the Lord, and one way or another, the Lord was going to fulfill it. The Lord keeps his words. But they thought that he had spoken of taking of rest in sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, to the intent ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. So we don't see any evidence that Jesus was doing anything that prevented him from going to Lazarus before he died. And Lazarus just wasn't dead. You could say he was deader than dead. More on that later. Then said Thomas, which is called Didymus, unto his fellow disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. We all know about when Jesus was crucified, how his disciples ran away from him. And it wasn't necessary that they were cowards, because here it is, they knew they were risking death by going to that area. And Thomas even stated, let's go die with him. So they were willing. But apart from fleeing when Jesus was arrested, was to fulfill scripture where it states, smite the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. And this would mean that Lazarus was deader than dead. He'd been dead for 4 days. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. 8 furlongs is a mile, so a little less than 2 miles. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. So she knew if Jesus was there, her brother would not have died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again, in the resurrection at the last day. Now at this point in time, the Israelites already had biblical record of Elijah raising a dead boy, Elisha doing the same. So it wasn't beyond the realm of possibility that Jesus could have raised the dead. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? This is part of the reason why the Lord can allow you to die. Not only can he allow you to die, he can allow you to rot. The same thing with your promises. He can allow those things to die, absolutely rot. Make it seem as if there's no way in the world it's going to come to pass. But we have to believe God at his word, even when he allows things to die around you, to the point where they start rotting. She saith unto him, Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. And when she had so said, she went her way, and she called Mary, her sister, secretly, saying, The Master is come, and calleth for thee. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and went unto him. Now Jesus was not yet come into the town, but was in that place where Martha met him. So it's kind of like Jesus, you could say, is still dragging his feet. He hasn't come to the town yet. How? He was still in the same place. I mean, Martha went back to the house to go tell Mary, and Jesus was still in the same place. Then the Jews, which were with her in the house, and comforted her, when they saw Mary, that she rose up hastily and went out, followed her, saying, She goeth unto the grave to weep there. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. Martha said it, now Mary's saying it. You may be saying the same thing too. Oh Lord, if you'd only acted sooner, it wouldn't have gone this far. Oh Lord, if you had only been here. Oh Lord, where are you? Where were you? When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit, and was troubled, and said, Where have ye laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Sometimes when we feel that the Lord is afar off, it may seem as if he doesn't care. And it's kind of like, Lord, you said, and this thing has gotten so bad despite what you said, and may seem like he doesn't care. But here we see, despite what the Lord allowed to happen to Lazarus for his glory, that he was still moved by everything. Because while Lazarus was dead, it had now been 4 days. His family, his friends, they've been suffering, even though all this was being done for God's glory. Then said the Jews, Behold, how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man, which opened the eyes of the blind, have caused that even this man should not have died? And there are times we're in a situation where we didn't want it to get so bad. We didn't want it to die. We didn't want to see things just decay like that. But the Lord allowed it, because the bottom line is, he could have stopped it. Jesus therefore again, groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. I just spoke about how people's lives were reflective of Jesus. It is the same way how Jesus would be buried in a cave with a stone upon it. Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. So while the title of this may sound blasphemous, while the things I've said about the Lord, waiting, allowing Lazarus to die, may not be pleasing to the ears, Mary is saying, Lord, by this time he stinketh. Lazarus was rotting. Lazarus was decaying, and the Lord allowed it. How do you respond when the Lord allows your promise to die and begin rotting? How do you respond when the Lord has called you to do something, gave you all these incredible prophecies regarding what he's called you to do, and things just keep on happening, and it's like that word is just further and further away from coming to pass? It's like the word is literally dying. So again, she said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. See, it had been so long, so even though they've heard about people who've been raised from the dead before, After basically 3 days, that's kind of like it. They consider it too late. That's why Martha, even though she said, we know that God will do what you ask, she wasn't thinking that he would ask for God to raise Lazarus from the dead. She was thinking, well, at the resurrection, he will be raised. But Jesus had something else in mind, even though he had allowed Lazarus to die and start rotting. Jesus saith unto her, said I not unto thee, that if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Likewise, if you're waiting on something from the Lord, whether to start your ministry or another promise, the glory of the Lord, it's coming. His words will not return unto him void, but they will accomplish that which he had purposed. So even though things may seem dead, his word is still alive. In John 6, the Lord spoke about the words that he spoke, that they were spirit and they were life. His words will not return unto him void. They will accomplish that which he had purposed. Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. So again, a part of Lazarus dying, the people would know that God the Father had sent Jesus the Son. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. If you're going through things, say for example, spiritual warfare, and the Lord's allowing it, and Satan is buffeting you, when the Lord says enough, it ends. It's kind of like how Satan incited David to conduct a census of Israel. The Lord sent an angel as punishment for the Israelites. He had killed 77,000. The Lord said that is enough. That caused the angel to stop in his tracks. So the Lord may allow things. When he says enough, it's enough. He may allow things. When he says it's time for this to happen, it is going to happen. So the Lord called out Lazarus and told him to come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed on him. For God's glory. Lazarus was undeniably, undisputably dead. But because Jesus rose him from the dead, we still speak about Lazarus to this day. So the Lord didn't just receive glory on that day. He's been receiving glory ever since. So yes, he allowed Lazarus to die. He allowed Lazarus to rot. But the Lord has received much glory out of this story. The same thing goes for you. What the Lord has allowed to happen, if he has said something, he's going to bring it to pass. And it is for his glory. And a part of how the Lord gets glory is by you sharing your testimony of what the Lord has done for you. Of what the Lord has done for you. Now I could end this teaching right there, but there's more. There's more. So that's just one example of the Lord basically allowing someone to rot. Another person, and I called his name earlier, was Joseph. The Lord gave Joseph 2 dreams as recorded in Genesis 37. Dreams about his family bowing down to him. So clearly, the Lord's going to elevate him to a position. But the next thing you know, Joseph's father, Jacob, sent him to go check on his brothers. His brothers were jealous of him. There was some bad blood in the family. They wanted to kill him. They ended up casting him down into a pit. And it's like they were eating while Joseph was in the pit. I'm like, that's cold. His own brothers. Think about killing him. Then they sold him to the Ishmaelites, who took him into Egypt. There he became a slave. Well, he became a slave once he was sold to the Ishmaelites. He worked in Potiphar's house. He was a slave. The Lord elevated him in the house where he was the steward, the overseer in the house, but he was still a slave. Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of sexual impropriety, and Potiphar ended up putting him in prison. So it's like it went from bad to worse. See, when Joseph was in a pit, at least his brothers could have pulled him up. Now, that would have upset Jacob, but at least they could have pulled him out and he could have continued living his life. But the Lord allowed things to happen to Joseph. And it's like his life just kept on getting worse. And I'm not sure if when Joseph was in the pit and they pulled him out, if he thought he had been pulled out of safety. But next thing you know, having been pulled out of the pit, then taken into captivity to Egypt, sold into slavery. Then from there, went to become a prisoner. Now the Lord still blessed him in prison, but he was a prisoner nonetheless. Pit, slavery, prison. But Joseph had promises from the Lord, and everything else happening seemed as if it was driving Joseph further and further away from the Lord's will being done. Yet it was all being done for God's glory. And all the pain, all the seeming diversions were positioning not David, but Joseph to exactly where the Lord wanted him. I mentioned David. Yet David went through some things too. The Lord had anointed him as Israel's future king. But the next thing you know, Saul, the then current king, tried killing David for years. So for years, it's like David seemed closer to death than the throne. But the Lord eventually fulfilled that promise. In Genesis 40, Joseph ended up in, while he was in prison, 2 of Pharaoh's men were imprisoned along with him. And Joseph interpreted the dreams for both of them. And I pick up in Genesis 40, start verse 14. And Joseph said, "But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this place." So Joseph was asking the cupbearer, whose dream he had just interpreted, the Lord gave him interpretation, that when the Pharaoh restores you in 3 days, put in a good word for me. So it seems as if Joseph was on his way to his breakthrough. And it continues, "For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me in the dungeon." So Joseph was being a righteous man. I just kept on suffering. So after interpreting the dream, Joseph asked the cupbearer, or the chief butler, that when the Pharaoh reinstated him, to put in a good word for him. Then we see, at the end of Genesis 40, picking up verse 20, it states, "And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them." So surely Joseph was going to get his breakthrough. He interpreted the cupbearer's dream. The cupbearer was like, you could say in a sense, the Pharaoh's right-hand man, because he got an audience with Pharaoh. He would sample the food, make sure it wasn't poisoned. He was in a position to put in a good word to Pharaoh. But just when it seemed as if Joseph was on his way out of prison, Genesis 40 verse 23, Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So the chief butler forgot about Joseph. It seems as if after all this stuff Joseph been through, he was finally going to get his breakthrough and get out of prison. That's how it happens sometimes. And yes, you may be thinking, oh, the devil is doing this. God is sovereign. If he wanted Joseph out at that time, the cupbearer or the butler would not have forgotten about him. And one of the things, if the butler had remembered him at that point in time, a part of that, Joseph's mindset could have possibly been that he owed the cupbearer, the butler, for putting a good word into him. And there are times when the Lord will allow things to die, because even the person that he may use to deliver you from something, to give you a breakthrough, he doesn't want you to be or feel indebted to the person, because it's ultimately the Lord who did it, the Lord who got the glory. Picking up in Genesis 41. And it came to pass that at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river, and behold. So it's been 2 years. I wonder where Joseph is during this time. Maybe someone else put in a good word for him that Joseph could get out. So at least now we know it had been 2 years since Joseph interpreted the dreams for the cupbearer or the butler and also the baker. So 2 full years and Joseph and the Pharaoh had a dream. And behold, there came out of the river 7 well-favored kine cattle and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river, and the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. And he slept and dreamed the second time. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, rank and good. And behold, 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. So Pharaoh didn't just have 1 dream, he had 2. And his spirit was troubled. And you may have had dreams where you had a dream and you woke up, and it may not have been a good dream where you woke up and it's like, in a sense, you shook it off. But then you have a dream and it's from the Lord, and he's pressing something out of you because he wants you to take action. And that thing becomes a burden. And if you need an interpretation, then like praying to the Lord to ask what the dream means. But it's like you have a burden because you need to take action on this matter. So again, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and for all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. In Revelation 3, 7 through 8, the Lord spoke about him having the keys of David, and that he opens doors that no one can shut, and he shuts doors no one can open. A part of that is the Lord can shut down an enemy. Just like on Mount Carmel, he had Elijah call for the 850 false prophets of Baal. Only 450 showed up. Elijah told him, dress this animal on this altar and call for your God, and the God who answers by fire. Well, if Baal could have answered by fire, the Lord shut that down. And the only person who answered at all that day on Mount Carmel was the true and living God. So God knows how to shut down the enemy. So when I say that if he wanted to stop something, he could have stopped it. But for some reason, he allowed it. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. So now he remembers. Now the Lord didn't give the butler a dream. He gave the Pharaoh. So in some aspects, he's taken Joseph's deliverance out of the butler's hand, even though he has a part to play. And this is the Lord doing things in his sovereignty. Again, Zechariah 4:6, maybe a theme throughout this that didn't even come up before or while taking the notes for this. And I received the revelation for this message on May 11th, 2020. But today is June 13th and I'm just recording it. And continues, Pharaoh's wrath with his servants, and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant of the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. Oh, so 2 years later, after the chief butler had forgotten about him, Joseph was still in prison. By the way, someone recently sent me a copy of a movie about Joseph. And I've seen many iterations of it before. Never seen that one, but I watched it. And one of the most moving parts of the movie to me was when they called Joseph out of prison. I've said in another video, I've been watching some video clips about deliverance recently. But deliverance isn't about people casting out devils. Deliverance are some men who are on the skeleton coast of Africa in Namibia, and they're rescuing sea lions who've been ensnared and tangled in different kind of things, like what they call ghost nets or fishing line, hooks, all kind of things that are ensnaring these animals. And they, in a sense, have to sneak up and try to get close enough. Then they run up on them. If the animals are young enough, like they're pups, they'll grab them by the rear flippers and hold on to them that way. Then I have to hold them down, and it doesn't seem pleasant that they're being held down, but the animals are also strong, so they're holding them down so they can cut them loose off those snares. And in one case, there was a pup where it was barking as men were chasing after it, then held it down. But once they cut it loose, it wasn't a rush to get loose because it felt that freedom. That spoke of deliverance. I have a burden. I like seeing people get free. Jesus, when he was in the synagogue and he saw the woman who'd been bound by Satan for 18 years. Now the Pharisees were saying, are there not 6 days in a week that people can get healed? And they had an issue with it being done on the Sabbath. And by the way, today is the Sabbath. But they had an issue with it being done on the Sabbath. But Jesus chastised them and let them know that if you have an ox or a donkey that needs water, won't you give it water on the Sabbath? And it spoke about the woman who'd been bound by Satan for 18 years. So I've seen some of these videos and I actually enjoy them. And I've seen some where people are doing things underwater, like there was one with a tiger shark, another with like a blue whale, and cutting these animals free. But it speaks of deliverance. It's not always pleasant, and sometimes the things that are on these animals, the fish, where it's cutting into their skin, restricting their movement. And that's how many people are. That's one of the things where when you're being allowed to rot, or your promises being allowed to rot, things are bound, things are getting cut into, you're ensnared. You can't move as fast as you want to. Now, it's one thing, for example, if you're running and you're training by having a weighted vest, but no one is going to line up for the 100-meter dash, whether I'll just say the heats, the semifinal or the final, in like the Olympic Games, wearing a weighted vest. They try to dress as light as possible. Even their shoes, it's like it weighs nothing. So it's one thing to have weights on when training. When it's time to run a race, you want to be as light as possible. And that's what it's where when the Lord is strengthening you, building your spiritual strength, building your spiritual endurance. He may even allow the enemy to weigh you down. But at some point in time, he has to set you free. So with all these things that were going on with Joseph, in the movie, the most powerful part to me was when the Pharaoh called for him. And here we see that it had been 2 years. Now we know that Joseph had the dreams when he was 17. How long after that his brothers conspired against him, we're not sure. But we're looking at about 13 years from the time that Joseph had a dream to him being thrown in the pit for a while, sold into slavery, then being in prison. So we're looking at 13 years. And everything else going on in Joseph's life, it's like the promises from the Lord were literally rotting. Nothing that was going on was pointing to those promises coming to pass. Everything that was going on was quite to the contrary. So here it is, where after all the time, the Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And there are times where what the Lord is going to do in your life, it just takes so long. It's like you're waiting, you're tired. Sometimes you want to choose someone else or choose something else. It's like, Lord, I've waited long. You may want to give up, but don't. Because like the Lord told Habakkuk in Habakkuk 2:2-3 about write the vision and make it plain. Though it tarries, wait for it. So Joseph had been in prison all that time. And everything the Lord had allowed was preparing Joseph. Joseph was a steward in Potiphar's house. Joseph was a steward in prison. So those things were preparing Joseph what the Lord had called him to do. So when the Lord says it's time, it's time. And when what the Lord wants to do in your life, it comes quickly. Now, some people may think you're an overnight success. But that's not the case. You had to wait for a long time. But you sprung forth quickly because the Lord had spent time preparing you. And you're literally like a seed that had been planted in the ground and developing those roots. And the next thing you know, you shoot up. People may think it happened overnight. But Joseph, they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And likewise, when the Lord does what he's going to do, it happens quickly. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. When the Lord said, Lazarus, come out or come forth, it didn't take 4 days for Lazarus to come forth. So then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. So all this happened quickly. And he got a chance to clean up. He got a chance to clean up. So a lot of times the Lord will allow you to go through a lot of mess, and he cleans you up quickly. Lazarus, he said, come forth. Lazarus came forth, bound in his grave clothes. And the Lord told the people to remove those things from him. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee, that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And this is one of the reasons why the Lord allows things to die. One of the things the Lord is allowing to die is pride. Joseph had reason to be proud. He was a young man at 17, and he was just telling his family, oh, the Lord gave me a dream. sometimes the Lord will tell us things and we actually need to be quiet about it. So he was telling family, oh, the Lord gave me these dreams, sharing with his family, but he shared the first dream with his brothers, and it said that his brothers hated him even more. Joseph had another dream, and he went back to them, still sharing information with them, which caused them to hate him even more. Hence, him getting thrown into the pit. Hence, them conspiring to kill him. One of the things that had happened, the Lord allowed Joseph's pride to die. He had humbled Joseph throughout this process. In Daniel 4, and I have another lesson I'm going to teach in Daniel that I think I'm going to speak about this. But in Daniel 4, the Lord had Daniel warn King Nebuchadnezzar about his pride. He had been brought up high, but his pride brought him low. And the Lord doesn't want to elevate us, to take us to a point, for example, that it gives the enemy an opportunity to bring us down low when we're at a high point, so we can keep on progressing. And one of the things I've said, and I did another teaching, about keeping your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. Meaning, remain grounded, but keep your focus on the Lord. So Joseph, coming out of prison, glorifying the Lord. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And there are times you can tell when a person is a mature minister, or even a minister who truly has a calling from the Lord, who has been through a process based on how they glorify the Lord. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, and behold, there came out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt, for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke. As I was reading this, a part of me was like, maybe I could just skip this portion to make this teaching a little bit shorter. But the Pharaoh spoke about how the 7 lean cattle ate the 7 fat cattle, but even though they had eaten the 7 fat cattle, they were still lean. Now you probably know what the dream means already, but it also speaks about how sometimes, like if you have a promise from the Lord, people will try to eat, or basically eat up your promise to prevent you from getting it. But it's like if you had eaten the promise, you'd have gotten fat from it, meaning it would have nourished you. But if someone else tries eating your promise, it is not going to do them what the Lord would have it do unto you. So it's truly your promise. That wouldn't have come up if I hadn't read this. So again, there are times, for example, someone or others may want to eat your promise, and if they do, it won't do them any good. In fact, it may actually do them more harm than good. But if you eat it, then you'll benefit from it, where others won't. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good, and behold, 7 ears withered thin, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the 7 ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. Another thing that's coming up. When it comes to the kingdom of darkness, they have no hope for redemption. And one thing that gives them joy, actually it's more like give them a little bit of happiness, is trying to torment children of God. But the thing is, no matter how they try to, well, torment children of God or simply just people, no matter how much they torment people, He may give them momentary pleasure, but then they need to refill that pleasure. And no matter how much they try to steal, kill, or destroy the things of the Lord, their pleasure is fleeting. And what they have coming, being condemned to lake of fire and brimstone forever, they will never get true joy, no matter how much they eat, no matter what they do. And that's part of the reason why they keep on doing the evil that they do. The pleasure is fleeting. It's momentary. It's not lasting. So again, and the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears, and I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. Oh yes, if you have people working witchcraft against you, the Lord can shut that down too, so that their efforts, it will not work at all. When the Lord says time, it is time, and no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Now, while it may look like a weapon has been prospering against you, when the Lord decides to do His thing, you realize those weapons weren't prospering at all. The only thing it was prospering at doing was setting things up for the Lord to bless you tremendously. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. This is a thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, He showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And it's like how the enemy's works may seem as if they're prospering. And they may, quote unquote, prosper for a season. But then they're going to experience a famine that makes everything they did before meaningless. Because they can't store up anything to counteract the famine the Lord has for them. And the Lord has a famine for them that will last all eternity. They'll be tormented day and night, forever and ever. It is not a place for human beings. If you have stuff going on, it's time to repent. No matter what the enemy throw at you, it's not going to be as worse. It's not going to be worse than what will happen if you end up parting with the enemy and you join them in the lake of fire and brimstone for all eternity. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now this gives us a view of how the Lord works. So the Lord may have promised you something. Especially if you have a dream that repeats and means the same thing, and it happens in one night. It is something, if it's of the Lord, it's something the Lord is trying to bring to pass. And it means it has been firmly established. Now the enemy may try to mirror things, but the meaning would be different. The enemy's trying to do his thing, but it's not what the enemy is doing. It's about what the Lord is doing. So those dreams are from the Lord. And the Lord gave it to Pharaoh. The Bible tells us, by 2 or 3 witnesses, let every matter be established. That's how one of the ways the Lord establishes his word. He gave it to the Pharaoh twice. Now Joseph, he had 2 dreams, but they're on different nights. So the Lord did confirm his words, that those were from him. But that took a little bit longer to come to pass. With the Pharaoh, 2 nights, 1 dream, saying the same thing. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, to take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come up, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. For those of you who are prophetic or your prophets, this is another thing about prophetic ministry. Joseph didn't just tell him what the dream meant. Joseph gave him advice regarding the dream. The dream gave knowledge. Now Joseph was giving wisdom, because knowledge is knowing about things. Wisdom is the application of the knowledge. There's going to be a famine. What to do about the famine? And sometimes when we prophesy to people, for example, we need to warn them. Okay, what you're getting, this is a great word from the Lord. But one of the things that's characteristic of a great word from the Lord is the Lord tends to attack it. Not the Lord, correction, the devil tends to attack it. So for example, Genesis 12, the Lord told Abraham he was going to make him the father of nations. At the end of Genesis 12, you see how the Pharaoh at that time had taken Sarai into his harem after the Lord had made a promise. And even more powerful, in Genesis 18, the Lord told Abraham and Sarah that within a year he was going to bless him with a child. You flip to Genesis 20, and King Abimelech of Gerar had taken Sarah into his harem. So it's an attack of the enemy against the promise of the Lord. That's one of the things, when you give a person a prophecy, is to have the wisdom to say, hey, this is a good word. And because of it, the enemy is going to try to do everything possible to discourage you. So we have to have wisdom. And that may require praying to the Lord. It's like, okay, you showed me this. Now what do we do with this? In some things the Lord gives you a revelation, and it's for you to pray privately. He may give you a revelation, and it's for you to pray and also ask others to join you in praying. So we need wisdom regarding what to do. So Joseph gave the Pharaoh sage or wise advice regarding what to do about the coming plenteous years and coming years of famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Now, if you have the ability to interpret dreams, sometimes you may interpret a dream for someone. It is actually accurate, and the person will come into agreement with it because it resonates with their spirit. Sometimes you may give a person a revelation based on that dream interpretation, and the person may not agree with it. But it doesn't mean that what you gave them wasn't from the Lord. When Joseph told the cupbearer, not the cupbearer, but the baker, that he was going to die in 3 days, that wasn't a very comforting word, but it came to pass. And it continues. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And by the way, Pharaoh is the God king, as they say. The quote-unquote God, Ra, incarnate. Even Ra is in the name Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So when Joseph asked the cupbearer, the butler, to put in a good word for him, maybe Joseph was thinking, maybe I could work in his dream interpretation section. Who knows? But I don't think Joseph was thinking that he could be the governor. But also nothing about the Lord's words. The Lord's words need to come to pass in accordance with his will and his timing. If the butler had put in a good word to the Pharaoh, maybe the Pharaoh would have been like, yeah, it's great that he interpreted that dream, but I have my sorcerers and my wise men. I don't need that guy. Well, at this point in time, the Lord shut everything down, and they absolutely needed Joseph. So there's a reason why the Lord allows things to happen. He's also setting other conditions for the perfect timing to bring things to pass. It may be 4 days after death, but it's going to be in his perfect timing. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And now with Joseph getting elevated like this, it wasn't because of the cupbearer. He knew it was because of the Lord, his God. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. Daniel also experienced this elevation where he was serving among the eunuchs, when the Lord gave him an interpretation for Nebuchadnezzar's dream that he hadn't forgotten what the dream was. When the Lord gave Daniel the dream and its meaning, Nebuchadnezzar elevated him. Daniel put in a good word for Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego for them to also get elevated. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, Bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. What an elevation. So even though the Lord may allows you to rot, when he brings you up, it is for his glory, and he will recompense. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Now mind you, Joseph was in Hebrew and being elevated as second in command of Egypt. Wow. The Lord can open doors like that. So it ties to Revelation 3, 7 through 8. And a part of Revelation 3 verse 8, the Lord spoke about knowing they have a little strength, but you have not denied his name. Joseph did not deny the Lord's name. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath Paneah, which many scholars believe means a revealer of secrets. And he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, and Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. So not only did Joseph get this position, he also got a bride. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. I'll skip down to verse 50. I had planned on stopping there, but this is also important. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. So Joseph was married to an Egyptian. Oh boy. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. So despite all the things Joseph had been through, when the Lord elevated him and also blessed him with this child, the firstborn son Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. The Lord has ways of blessing you to make you forget, to help heal you from all the afflictions that you went through on your way to receiving your promise. For whatsoever the promise is. And the name of the second called he Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. I say again, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So yes, the Lord may allow you to rot, but he will bring you out, heal you of your wounds, cleanse you of your stench, and bless the works of your hand for his glory. Flipping to Luke 24. See, Jesus also experienced what you could call a rotting, because he died and he was in the grave for a couple of days. In Luke 24, starting verse 1. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared and certain others with them. And they found a stone rolled away from the sepulchre. And they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. And they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth. And they said unto them, Why seek ye the living among the dead? So Jesus was no longer dead. He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, The Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men, and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And they remembered his words, and returned from the sepulchre, and told all these things unto the 11, and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene, and Joanna, and Mary the mother of James, and other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles. So even Jesus himself was dead, but was now risen. There are two who are coming who will do great works in the Lord's name. They will also actually physically die. In Revelation 11, starting verse 3, it states, And I will give power unto my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth, 3.5 years. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. These have power to shut up heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all the plagues, as often as they will. And a part of the reason why the Lord allows things to die, He allows you to rot, is because He wants to empower you and He wants you to remain humble. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. And yes, there are times the Lord allow you to die, to rot, in a manner of speaking, because He wants you to be faithful to Him to the point of death. Revelation 12:11 speaks about how they overcame him, meaning the devil, with the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony, and not loving their lives unto the death. So we overcome the enemy with the blood of the Lamb. You can't be afraid to testify. That's another weapon of our warfare. And not loving your life even to the point of death. And you having died before, whether naturally or spiritually or some other way, you don't love your life to death, and you serve the Lord your God faithfully. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. And they of the people, and kindreds, and tongues, and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. So they'll be stinking. Just like how Mary or Martha was saying, by this time his body stinketh. And they shall dwell upon the earth, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell upon them that saw them. So this for God's glory, because those men were undoubtedly dead. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. So sometimes the Lord does things and He allows the enemy to see it. Because when He allows the enemy to see it, and the enemy may start celebrating over you, the Lord also puts the enemy in a position to see him bless you. Just like how David in the 23rd Psalm spoke about how the Lord prepared a table for him in the presence of his enemies. Scripture tells us about where the dead bodies are, so will the vultures or the eagles be. So sometimes when it seems as if you're dying, your promises are dying, that's when the enemy will come around. And the Lord wants to bless you in the presence of your enemies. In John 12, starting verse 23, it states, And Jesus answered them, saying, The hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me. And where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. I back up to where Jesus said, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat shall fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. The Lord allow you to die. He will allow you to rot, for you to bring forth much fruit, to glorify Him, the true and living God. In verse 27, the Lord even said, "Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. For this cause came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name." Then came there a voice from heaven, saying, "I have both glorified it and will glorify it again." So what you're going through is for the glory of the Lord. What you are going through is for the glory of the Lord. And in John 10:10, the Lord said, "The thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly." So the Lord may allow you to go through seasons where the enemy is stealing, he's killing, and he's destroying. But the Lord will give you that abundant life. And actually go back to John 11, verses 25 through 26, where Jesus said unto Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this?" So even if the Lord allows things to die, he is the resurrection. So don't lose hope. And like the Lord said in Joel 2:25, Actually, let me back up to start verse 21. "Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord will do great things. Be not afraid, ye beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness do spring. For the tree beareth her fruit, the fig tree and the vine do yield their strength. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God. For he hath given you the former rain moderately, and he will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain and the latter rain in the first month. And the floors shall be full of wheat, and the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. And I will restore to you the years the locust hath eaten, the cankerworm, and the caterpillar, and the palmer worm, my great army, which I sent among you." So it's the Lord who sent these things, but he will restore the years that those forms of pestilence took, everything that the enemy did. Verse 26, "And ye shall eat in plenty, and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, and that hath dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never be ashamed." The other day, and actually before watching this Joseph movie again, one of the things that came to mind was, I wonder what it was like that first night when Joseph was no longer sleeping in prison. I wonder what it was like when he was worshiping the Lord that night. I wonder what it was like when he came out of, when he was delivered of everything and he was free. Maybe this gives us a look into it. The Israelites who later joined Joseph in Egypt, things went well for them for a while, but then things changed and they were in bondage for 400 years. And the Lord sent Moses to deliver them. Then the Pharaoh started afflicting them because things were getting difficult, and even the Israelites started complaining. I mean, Their deliverance had come, but things had gotten worse for a while. Which, when I spoke about the seals earlier, the sea lions, their momentary deliverance had come, but it seemed like something terrifying to have people chasing after them. And they're trying to get into the sea in order to escape, into the ocean to escape. But they're actually trying to escape from their deliverance, because the sea, even though it seemed as if it was offering freedom, it was still keeping them in bondage. And when those men held them down, it may seem life-threatening, and sometimes the seals were fighting, biting, but it was their moment of deliverance. Some had fishing lines that was cutting into your skin, because as they grew, whatever went around their neck was becoming tighter and tighter. The more they thrived was the more the line was cutting into their necks. And in some cases, when they cut the lines, they literally had to peel the line out of the fishing line out of the womb. And it was undoubtedly painful. And even the seawater would help with the healing afterwards. But they needed to be restrained for a while and to be set free. It didn't seem like they were coming out of bondage, but it was exactly what they needed. So there are things where it may seem harsh, but the Lord is actually dealing wondrously. In Joel 2, verse 32, it states, "And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered." I say again, "And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and in the remnant whom the Lord has called." There's a remnant. There's deliverance in the name of the Lord Jesus. We also know that Job, he went through some things at the hands of the enemy. Most of the book of Job is about his suffering, but it ends on a very good note. And Job also lost 10 children along the way. But in Job 42, starting verse 10, "And the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before." Can you imagine being blessed in such a way? And one thing is, you may think you've lost much, but in actuality, you've lost a whole lot more. You can't keep track of everything the enemy has stolen from you, but the Lord keeps accurate records, and he does recompense. Which also includes recompense of pain and suffering. "Then came there unto him all his brethren and all his sisters, and all they that had been of his acquaintance before, and did eat bread with him in his house. And they bemoaned him, and comforted him all over the evil that the Lord had brought upon him." The Lord brought the evil upon him? See, in Joel 2:25, the Lord said that the locust, the cankerworm, the caterpillar, and the palmerworm, the great army that he had sent, not the enemy, but the Lord had sent. So again, "and comfort him over all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him. Every man also gave him a piece of money, and everyone an earring of gold. So the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than his beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep, and 6,000 camels, and 1,000 yoke yokes of oxen and 1,000 she-asses. He had also 7 sons and 3 daughters, to replace the children he had lost. And he called the name of the first Jemimah, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen Hapuk. Oh boy, those names. And in all the land were no women found so fair as the daughters of Job, and their father gave them inheritance among the brethren. Imagine that. His daughters got an inheritance. Wow. After this lived Job 140 years, and saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. Now mind you, in Genesis 6, the Lord spoke about limiting people's lives to 120 years. Now we know that Sarah died at 127, but Sarah went through some things where she had been waiting on a promise from the Lord for many years. And so because of her pain and suffering, the Lord actually extended her life so she could live to see Isaac get to a good age. So even though the Lord had limited the people's lifespan to 120 years, he allowed Sarah to live a little beyond that. Abraham died at 175. The Lord extended his life. Again, he suffered, he endured some things for the Lord. Job also suffered for the Lord. And said, and after this lived Job 140 years. So how old Job was, he lived for 140 years after that. And saw his sons and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of years. The Lord is faithful. I begin to end with Revelation chapter 1, verse 18, where the Lord said, I am he that liveth, and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of death and hell. So if the Lord allows you to die, he will also let you live, because death will have no hold on you. And in Revelation 21, so verse 1, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. No more marine kingdom. Yeah. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them, and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. The former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, For these words are true and faithful. So again, behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, it is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. So yes, there are times when the Lord will allow you to rot, but the Lord keeps death and hell. Jesus is the resurrection. He's the way, the truth, and the life. His words, his promises for your life will come to pass, regardless of what things look like. So there are times when it's like, Lord, it seems as if the Lord has forsaken you. He has allowed your promise to seemingly die and rot. But death didn't overcome him. He overcame death. And he's a resurrection. The words he speaks, they bring life. He said, Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus came forth. Your promises are not dead. Joseph went through some things that made it seem as if he would never have his brothers bow down to him. But they did. And Joseph handled the situation with humility. He could have had them killed if vengeance was on his mind. But vengeance belongs to the Lord. You are a child of the Most High God, and I pray this blesses you to come out, and even after you've come out of your situation. God bless you. Jesus is Lord, and let everything that has breath praise ye the Lord. Praise ye the Lord.